Welcome back to our series on the world's greatest empires. In part 1, we journeyed through the ancient and medieval eras, exploring titans like the Romans and Mongols. Now, in part 2, we step into the modern age to examine the empires that forged the world we know today. The Qing dynasty and the Russian, Spanish, and British empires. Their stories are not just history. They are the foundations of our contemporary global landscape. Our exploration begins in East Asia with the Qing dynasty, China's final imperial rulers, who held power from 1644 to 1912. The Qing were masters of expansion, pushing the empire's borders to their greatest extent, bringing regions like Tibet, Xinjiang, and Mongolia under their control. This was an era of profound cultural and artistic flourishing. However, the 19th century ushered in a storm of challenges. The humiliating defeats in the Opium Wars against Britain exposed a critical vulnerability. Internally, devastating conflicts like the Taiping Rebellion, which claimed tens of millions of lives, shook the dynasty to its core. All the while, relentless pressure from Western powers eager to carve up China for their own gain intensified. The court attempted a series of ambitious reforms, known as the Self-Strengthening Movement, trying to modernize the military and administration along Western lines. But these efforts were too little, too late. The deep-seated institutional problems and external pressures were overwhelming. In 1912, the last emperor abdicated, bringing an end to over 2,000 years of imperial rule in China and giving rise to the new Republic of China. The fall of the Qing was a momentous event, marking the painful and complex transition of a civilizational empire into a modern nation-state. From the east, we travel west to the immense expanse of the Russian Empire. At its peak, this colossal empire stretched from the Baltic Sea in Europe all the way across Siberia to the Pacific Ocean, covering 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. For over 300 years, the Romanov dynasty presided over this vast domain. Their reign saw incredible territorial growth and a golden age of Russian culture. The world was gifted the literary genius of authors like Leo Tolstoy and Fyodor Dostoevsky, and the sublime music of composers like Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. These cultural achievements projected an image of a sophisticated and powerful empire. But beneath this glittering surface lay a society riddled with deep-seated problems. The vast majority of the population were serfs, living in conditions of abject poverty and virtual slavery until their emancipation in 1861, an event which itself created new social tensions. Political dissent was ruthlessly suppressed by the Tsar's secret police, breeding a culture of underground revolutionary movements. The immense strain of World War I proved to be the final, fatal blow. The war devastated the Russian army, caused catastrophic food shortages at home, and shattered the last vestiges of the Tsar's authority. In 1917, two revolutions swept the country. The first overthrew the Tsar, and the second, led by the Bolsheviks, brought a radical new ideology to power. The brutal execution of the imperial family in 1918 was a grim finale to centuries of Romanov rule, paving the way for the creation of an entirely new kind of state, the Soviet Union. Now, let's set sail for the Spanish Empire, arguably the world's first truly global empire. Its story begins with the daring voyages of Christopher Columbus in 1492. Which opened up a new world for European conquest. In the decades that followed, Spanish conquistadors toppled the Aztec and Inca empires, establishing a vast colonial dominion that stretched from modern-day California down to the tip of South America. They also established outposts in Africa and the Philippines, connecting the globe under a single crown. The engine of this empire was wealth. Specifically, the immense quantities of silver and gold extracted from the mines of Potosi and Zacatecas. This treasure flowed back to Spain, financing its powerful armies and navies. Its European wars against rivals like France and the Ottoman Empire and fueling a remarkable cultural flourishing known as the Siglo de Oro, or Golden Age. This was the era of Cervantes, Don Quixote, and the masterful paintings of Diego Velázquez. However, the empire's foundations were unstable. The constant warfare was ruinously expensive, and the reliance on colonial riches stunted Spain's domestic economy. Economic mismanagement and repeated bankruptcies became a recurring theme. More importantly, the ideas of enlightenment and revolution began to spread across the Atlantic. Inspired by the American and French revolutions, independence movements erupted across Spanish America in the early 19th century. Figures, like Simon Bolivar and José de San Martín, led successful wars of liberation. And by 1830, Spain had lost almost all of its mainland American colonies. The final blow came in 1898 with the Spanish-American War, which saw Spain lose Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines to the United States. Once a global hegemon, the Spanish Empire faded into a second-tier power, leaving behind a legacy of language, religion, and culture that continues to define Latin America. Finally, we arrive at the British Empire, without question the largest empire in history. On maps from the early 20th century, vast swaths of the globe were colored pink, denoting British control. At its zenith, the empire governed nearly a quarter of the world's land and a quarter of its people. The saying, "the sun never sets on the British Empire," was literal truth. Its power was built on three pillars: an unbeatable Royal Navy that controlled the world's oceans, a dominant industrial economy that produced goods for a global market, and a sprawling network of colonies, dominions, and protectorates. From Canada and Australia to India and Nigeria, British influence was profound. The empire spread the English language, common law, and parliamentary systems of government across the world. But this legacy is deeply complex. The empire's wealth was often built on the exploitation of colonial labor and resources. Its rule was imposed and maintained through military force, leading to numerous conflicts and rebellions. The drive for profit led to tragedies like the Opium Wars and the Great Famine in Ireland. The immense cost of 2 world wars, both in blood and treasure, fatally weakened Britain. The imperial power could no longer afford to maintain its vast global commitments. A powerful wave of nationalism and decolonization swept the globe after 1945. Britain, sometimes peacefully, sometimes violently, relinquished control of its territories. The empire gradually transformed into the modern Commonwealth of Nations, a voluntary association of independent states. Many historians see the handover of Hong Kong back to China in 1997 as the final symbolic end of this colossal global project. The stories of the Qing, Russian, Spanish, and British empires are a powerful conclusion to our journey. Like their ancient and medieval predecessors, they demonstrate the cyclical nature of power, the inevitable rise and fall. They built global networks, spurred technological innovation, and fostered incredible cultural exchange. But they also inflicted immense suffering through conquest, exploitation, and conflict. They have left behind an intricate and often contested legacy. The borders they drew, the languages they spread, and the economic systems they created continue to shape our world in profound and countless ways. Understanding their history is essential to understanding the world we all share today. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey through the rise and fall of the world's greatest empires. If you enjoyed this series, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into history.